So like, we're not trying to have you out anyone or anything, but can you give us an example of the weirdest way you've seen shadow AI kind of crop up within an organization? I'll give you an example for me first. I've got one client that was really concerned that AI was being used with an individual taking photos of different documents and then, uploading it to an unapproved AI. No real way to prove that, right? Because if that was the actual case, the behavior that was suspicious and was one worth investigating and so forth. But have you seen as you've been going through and working with different organizations? Because shadow tech is always going to be there. I've been guilty of shadow tech in the past too, right? At least that's what non-binding arbitration says. So, what's your thoughts?
The most insidious shadow AI situations I've seen were where developers not even intending to evade any sort of, guidelines, or there might not have even been guidelines in place, have integrated models, trained in China or on Russian data sets, really not even understanding the provenance of the model that they've integrated into a system. And we've seen from things like DeepSeek, from testing of that even if you're
Yeah.
running it in a non-SaaS environment, you're not necessarily like exposing your data to Chinese authorities, but you're still running the model on a local environment or a private cloud. You're still going to get outputs that are tainted in a certain degree.
Hmm.
And like I said, you can't get AI without bias, but there's clearly an editorial line that the model has been instructed in, and it's going to reproduce that line in its output. So I think being careful about the sources of your training data and the sources of
Hmm.
the models that you're using is going to be increasingly.
That because I want you to go a little further with that and speak to if someone were to ask you which models should not trust based on your experience, do you have like a top five? These are the models. Don't use these.
I'll say off the top of my head, I probably couldn't give that to you, although Stackware does maintain a very detailed database that you can actually get a free trial for, that has like all the hallucination rates, all the identified risks for all of the models that we have data
I like
for.
that. Giving people
Um,
their own information to make their own choice.
we what we'll
That's
do is
nice. That's a great
we'll
service.
say we'll say for our customers is we'll say, okay, you've got a model with this hallucination rate based on third party evaluation data. We estimate you have this many employees. They're making these number of prompts per day. You're going to get this number of inaccurate outputs as a result from using the model. And here's the business impact of doing that. So that's the type of analysis that we run. And then that's kind of on a non-malicious, just error rate thing. The real problem is that with data poisoning, you can get really tailored in terms of what specific outputs you're tainting, so that they if you have a 10% hallucination rate, maybe it's just like 0.01% that are the target misinformation responses that are coming out of the model, and that can really change things. There's a company whose name is escaping me, but they did a pretty interesting kind of red team exercise on Hugging Face, where they infiltrated a poison model for that gave a response essentially saying that the first man on the moon was Yuri Gagarin, who's like a
Oh, yeah.
Soviet cosmonaut, rather
Yep.
than Neil Armstrong.
Awesome. No, no, I agree. I like that feature. One of the capabilities that one of the apps that I use is called Ground News, and I really like it because every time you're going to read an article, it will tell you specifically who's funding that news organization,
Mhm.
donations they've made to certain things, any indication of bias and so forth, to allow the reader to make that decision on if they're going to keep going forward. So having that capability is something that I think is you're enabling more than deciding for the clients that you have. I think that's a really great service.